Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
Hello, I'm Ray Lemura. Welcome to this edition of Cable Reports. Our guest today is State Senator Dave Marsden. Welcome, Senator.
Good to be with you, Ray.
Glad you could join us.
Great.
Senator, tell us a little bit about your district.
Well, my district is a rather long and winding piece of Fairfax County, stretching from almost one side to the other. I'm the answer to a trivia question. Myself and Senator Staff as the only two senators who have their Senate districts within one political jurisdiction. And so he has Virginia Beach and I have Fairfax County. Everybody else has a number of towns and cities and multiple counties and what have you, which is a good thing, I think, for the Senate. The Senate ought to take a broader perspective and have more jurisdictional views in their legislation and in their voting. So I think it's a good thing, but I'm all Fairfax County, from Centerville to Annandale.
Great. What are some of the major employers in your community?
To be honest with you, there are none. It's a bedroom community situation. I don't have any major centers of business, although some of the Dulles area office buildings are, with the technology world, the kind of on the western end of my district, but mostly it's subdivisions and strip malls from one end of the district to the other. So there is no centrality of any kind of a town or city or group. So you have to deal with different parts of the county and their different interests in terms of, their traffic interests, for instance, are very different. Transportation needs are very different. And so you play to those. And the western end of my district is very Republican, very conservative, and the eastern district is very liberal, very Democrat. And in between is kind of where I live, and that's always a little bit more up for grabs.
Great. Well, noting that it's more of a bedroom community, as you said, transportation has really got to be the key issue that you deal with on a consistent basis with folks, coming and going to work every day.
And it is, and of course the big thing for a number of us is the recent developments around progress being made on I-66, which is arguably the most crowded, most difficult commuter route on an interstate in this in the country. And as you know, they're going to be tolling it with express lanes and adding and making sure that we have the same 3 lanes that are free in each direction, but also providing for 4 lanes in the middle of all of that. That will be express lanes that people will have dynamic tolling. That the tolls will be based on how much traffic is is on the expressways and the express lanes. And we've just opened up inside the Beltway to that, and it's already showing progress. It was estimated that it would be a $17 round trip inside the Beltway to the district. It's turning out to be about $11.15 so far, although it's just only several weeks of data. But what that does, when we're getting more traffic through I-66 inside the Beltway, it's freeing up Route 50 and 29-211, which are adjacent roads that lead into the district. And that's the idea. People coming from Loudon now have an alternative that's freed up a little bit, is to come down Georgetown Pike and hop on the GW Parkway, come down along the river, and that's quicker than going to 66 and paying the tolls. So people are benefiting from it. People are using it. Sometimes the tolls get a little high in short periods of time, but hey, if the tolls are too high, don't use it.
Right.
That's the whole nature of dynamic tolling. And I wish we didn't have to toll any roads in the Commonwealth, but as you know, the anti-tax nature of the Virginia legislature has not allowed us to raise sufficient money in transportation to fund these things without tolls.
Right, right. It's well, I can tell you a verse on transportation.
Well, we try. It's an important thing, and there's all kinds of needs that we have in Northern Virginia, and of course, the same in Hampton Roads. And I was hearing the other day that Senator Hanger, Senator Obenshain in the Shenandoah Valley, very concerned about safety and on I-81, which
right.
takes, I heard about 48% of our truck traffic that comes through Virginia comes through there, and there's only 2 lanes. It's windy. The trucks are weaving back and forth. They're trying to pass each other. I-81 is an adventure.
Yes, exactly. Tell us about some of the committees that you serve on.
Oh, I have the most powerful committees in the Virginia Senate: local government, transportation, and agriculture. So I inherited those from Senator Cuccinelli when I first came on board. And when Democrats were briefly in charge, I picked up P&E rules and commerce and labor. So I had more committees than anybody in the Senate. But right now I have 3 committees that local government's not too terribly busy, and when Democrats are in the majority, I've chaired that committee.
Right.
But I love agriculture, natural resources, because it deals with a lot of the things that are important to my constituents, which is clean energy, renewable energy, pollution issues, things like that. And my district right now, though, is making a move in terms of agriculture. I think I'm up to 11 people growing tomatoes in their backyard. So we're becoming an agricultural force in Fairfax County.
And people have been, there's a murmur going on.
Yeah,
about
it's a buzz that's
Right.
pretty much everywhere. But yeah, the natural resources part of that is very exciting. And I have sort of taken up as the patron saint of trying to get something done about hound hunting, believe it or not. And some of my colleagues that I served with in the House of Delegates and in the Senate, it's a very awkward issue for them. They're there for hunting, and I don't have any problem with hound hunting. But these folks allow
And
their
this is
hounds.
not, you're not hunting hounds.
No,
using
you're hunting
hounds.
deer for the most part, but you're allowing your animals to trespass on other people's property because you have the right under Virginia law to retrieve them. So therefore, there's nothing that says you can't let them go on your property in the first place. There's no trespass. And a number of the hunt clubs in Virginia are not keeping in the spirit of being good neighbors and respecting people's property rights.
Right.
They're letting their hounds run everywhere, every day of the week. People have no ability to enjoy their property in peace and tranquility. And so I've been working on that. And here's the thing, and I think I finally convinced some of my colleagues in the Senate, and I've spoken with the Attorney General, I've spoken with people in the administration. These confrontations between landowners who these dogs are coming onto their property, we've already had one stabbing that has occurred, and we're pitting people against each other.
Right.
And when people get up to here with something and get frustrated that the law and their local law enforcement or the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries can't keep these folks off their property, their frustration levels rise, and people do foolish things.
Right.
And a lot of these deerhound hunters, now many of them are very responsible and they belong to
Sure.
good clubs, and they only release dogs onto property they're allowed to release them, and they're collared, and they stop them with the collars. They're able to often stop their dogs from going off the property where they're allowed to hunt. But many others, it's just they've become rural, irresponsible groups of folks who don't care about what they do to their neighbors.
Right.
And they laugh, and you can't stop us, and we'll let our dogs go wherever they're going to go. And the deerhound hunters in Virginia who are responsible people need to step up to the plate and allow some of the controls that I've tried to put on this sport and start supporting them because something bad's going to happen.
Exactly.
And we need to look after that. So a bit of a strange thing for somebody from Fairfax, but I can politically it's reasonably safe for me to wade into those waters where it's not for many of my
Right.
good friends on the Republican side who live in rural districts.
Exactly. What are some of the other key issues bills that you're working on? You've been here for a number of years now, so you're often viewed as somebody who gets things accomplished?
Yeah, I've gotten some things done since I'm here. I think the biggest thing is in providing CBD and THCA oils from the cannabis plant, and we've created an industry here in Virginia that's just about to take off.
So let's spend some time exploring that.
It has, it started about 4 years ago when I got a call from someone who used to be a constituent but was no longer, who was a refugee in Colorado because her daughter had intractable epilepsy and sometimes suffering some grand mal seizures and up to 1,000 petit mal seizures a day. And that was the only place that she could get Charlotte's Web, which is a hybrid of the cannabis plant that provides relief, not cure, but relief to kids with intractable epilepsy. And we've been able to make it lawful for that to be possessed in Virginia. It's an affirmative defense. If you have a recommendation from a physician that you have that condition, then you can't be prosecuted, either you or your parent. And for this young lady who was in my district, she's been reduced now to 50, perhaps, small seizures a day, and they're very, very brief and very quick. But she's able to lead a normal life. Right. And other kids who are cognitively impaired because of intractable epilepsy, they've been able to perk up and stay awake longer, and it's just been a marvelous thing. And there are many other disorders that can be benefited by these oils, and I've worked this year with Senator Saban Donovan, who is a physician, and we're pushing the legislature in the direction of allowing physicians to decide what disorders these oils can be used for. These are non-psychoactive oils. They will not get you high, but they have anti-inflammatory properties, and they work in ways we're not really sure about because of federal restrictions. We haven't done the research on that, but they seem to be largely side effect free. Maybe some minor things that have been mentioned, but nothing like some of the FDA drugs for controlling epilepsy and other conditions. But if you have neuropathy, which is where there's nothing wrong with your foot, but it's telling your brain it's on fire, it helps, and it helps keep people off opioids. It is helpful for people with Crohn's, with certain kinds of cancer pain, multiple sclerosis. It has some implications for. These are not cures, but they are providing relief to people in ways that can really be beneficial to them. And doctors aren't prescribing it, they're recommending it, and you will be able to go to one of 5 facilities in Virginia to purchase it, have it delivered to your home if you qualify and have the recommendation that's been filled out on a state form. And I think we're going to bring some medical relief to a lot of Virginians and give them some options.
Sure. What kind of reception have you been receiving from your fellow members?
So far, very good. It came through the Joint Healthcare Commission with a recommendation for physicians being able to do this. And as you know from your experience here, any kind of a bill that comes out of a commission that's been considered by a number of delegates and experts and what have you has greater weight than one delegate or senator stepping forward and introducing a bill.
Right. Exactly. Has your bill received any opposition?
Not so far. We have 2 different approaches. My approach is one single bill. Senator Donovan's is several different bills. I think the plan is that once her other bills get before there, I'll roll mine into hers and we'll go forward under her name, and I'll be the chief co-patron because I think what's important here is not whether your name's on the bill as to whether you get it done. Right. Nobody cares. Sure. Down here what kind of bills we pass. They care how we vote and what have you. You just want to get things done, and I want to make sure that it's in the best possible hands, and I think Senator Donovan is that messenger this year.
Right. Well, and that's one thing I think, I'm not sure if your constituents know, but you have the reputation of getting things accomplished and working across the aisle to really kind of make sure the Virginia way is accomplished and being successful with that.
Well, that's good to hear. It is. I've gotten involved in some rather unusual issues when I've been down here that I've been successful with, like scaling back some of the practices in the fox penning industry. Most Virginians aren't aware that a number of years ago there were, 5, 6, 7 years ago, there were 41 of these fox pens in Virginia, where 200 to 800 acres where foxes were captured and put into these pens to be chased by dogs in competitions for tracking. And the industry always claimed that nobody was getting killed. The foxes weren't getting killed. But we finally, a 10-year-old study that had never been evaluated by Virginia Tech found that 40% of the foxes died in these competitions. And DGIF had granted, Department of Game and Inland Fisheries had granted these pens the ability to not buy foxes, but to pay trappers for their time and expense, because you can't buy and sell wild animals in the Commonwealth.
Oh, okay.
But what the bill, so we put a sunset on the bill, on the practice at 40 years, which seems like that's not accomplishing much, but we also reduced the number of foxes they were allowed to put in from 1,300, which is what the average was then. We put them on a diet. You can only have 900 foxes spread amongst those pens. People didn't change their behavior, and so 20 people, from what I understand, have been arrested for bringing in out-of-state coyotes and foxes to put in these pens. They're felonies. People went to jail, and I'm hoping the Department of Game and Inland Fisheries will shut some of these irresponsible fox pens down who aren't abiding by the deal they made with me and the McAuliffe administration 3-4 years ago.
Right. Wow. So you're becoming quite the expert on all these kinds.
Yeah, I don't know why I get into these things, but I do. But I'm very excited today. Is that up on the uncontested calendar today? Is as you know, I sort of grew up in the corrections business. I ran my detention home back in Fairfax County for children, the Juvenile Detention Center, and I ran the Department of Juvenile Justice as Chief Deputy and Acting Director under Governors Gilmore and Warner back in the day. So these folks are important to me. Our corrections officers are horribly underpaid. I believe they start now at around $30,000, $31,000 per year. I'm working in Colorado right now with their Division of Youth Services, and they start at $45,000 a year. And so what we've got on the docket today, on the uncontested calendar, after multiple years of failure on this bill, is a procedural act to protect correctional officers and give them certain rights when they're being disciplined, dismissed, fired, transferred against their wishes, and just gives them representation and gives them a process they can count on to make sure that they receive procedural justice as they go through that process.
Sure. You mentioned the bill is on the uncontested calendar. Why don't you describe what that means to our viewers? Because that's an accomplishment.
Yep, it is. When something comes through a committee, it either comes through uncontested, which many bills do. That means everybody on the committee sees the value in it in a bipartisan way, votes for it, and it goes on the uncontested calendar on the floor.
So it's a unanimous
So it's
vote
unanimous, and other bills are put on what's called the regular calendar. In other words, somebody has either abstained or voted against it. Sometimes they're very close votes, and then they go on the regular calendar, and instead of being voted out in a block, they are voted out after individual debate on each of the bills. So getting on the calendar that is uncontested is always a sigh of relief for members in the General Assembly, which means they're not going to be in a floor fight on the vote.
Maybe, but the bill can be pulled out of the block.
It can be pulled out of the block and put on the regular calendar, and that certainly happens.
Not that
from
we've
time
never
to
seen
time.
that happen occur.
Oh boy, I've seen them pulled off the uncontested calendar because somebody has found something that everyone else overlooked and seen the bill defeated, even though 15 people in committee thought it was a great idea. So, but that's the way it works. You know,
Right.
we all have this system is all about checks and balances. The House sees things that the Senate missed. The Senate sees things that the House missed. The administration sees things that we both missed. There's all kinds of processes to make sure that when we come back here in April to finalize things, that we've got all the right amendments and additions and corrections to bills so that we don't inconvenience people with flawed legislation, and that we turn out things that are as good as they can be.
All right. I was doing a show earlier, and one of your fellow members said that they have introduced 61 pieces of legislation.
I know who that is.
How many bills do you have introduced? And maybe you can talk a little bit. I know you talk about the one bill.
I've done about 20 this year. Yeah. I did a bill to provide in-state tuition for the Dreamers and for those here on a temporary protected status. In other words, you're a political refugee from another country here in a green card. You're paying taxes in Virginia, you're working in Virginia, your family's working in Virginia, and you can't get in-state tuition. That's wrong. We've got to fix that. And the bill went down on a party line vote, both of them. There were two separate bills, one for the Dreamers and one for those on temporary protected status. Dreamers, as you may know, are kids who were brought here through no fault of their own as infants usually, or as toddlers, It's the only country they know, and yet, but they're here, technically they're here illegally. President Obama's executive action to protect the Dreamers and make them and provide for them to be here legally has been overturned by President Trump. And as you know, right now it's one of the major considerations with regards to the continuing funding for the government and the potential for a government shutdown.
Right.
We want these kids taken care of. There's almost 900,000 of them, and you know, they're here. They behave. They're not criminals. They're working. They're contributing, and we have all these vacant positions in the technology industry and other things that we can't fill, and yet we aren't educating these kids who want to fill those positions. And so it's something that I've worked on this year, and that we've got to get fixed.
Great, great. Outside of session, there are often commissions and other committees that investigate other things. What kind of other boards or commissions do you serve on outside of session?
I'm on the Disability Commission, and we're one of the things I've been pushing in the Disability Commission is making sure that transportation services offered through a large state contract to localities and what have you across the Commonwealth is being filled properly. We often give these things out to low bid, and sometimes the people providing these transportation services to the disabled are not capable of fulfilling the contract. Their drivers don't show up, they don't pay them enough, any number of problems. So that's one thing I've been working on there. The other commission I'm on is another one that I'm on is the Commission on Youth. And next year we're going to put on the docket a study of school resource officers. Now, school resource officers generally have been a good thing. Uniformed officer in the high schools mostly, who are there to keep order and establish relationships with kids. But sometimes we have a whole generation of high school principals who haven't had to deal with discipline the way high school principals did when you and I were coming up, because there's a police officer there and they can kind of criminalize things. Mm-hmm. And I want to find out whether the school resource officer program, which has such great potential and does some really good things, whether it's contributing to that by criminalizing misbehavior at schools and putting kids into the court system. Mm-hmm. And usually there's an overrepresentation of minorities in that circumstance, and so we want to take a close look at that. Mm-hmm. And the bill I have up this year for my third commission, which is the Commission on the Foundation for Healthy Youth, which is an anti-smoking group established when the tobacco fund was created. Mm-hmm. After the settlement with the tobacco companies around the health damage that cigarettes do. And this group does a wonderful job under the leadership of Marty Kilgore. Jerry Kilgore's spouse. Jerry, as you know, was former Attorney General. Mm-hmm. And candidate for governor. And so I have a bill in this year that my dear departed late friend John Miller, who passed away over a year ago, was his passion, and we're trying to get all tobacco, even in non-school events, no vaping, no smoking, no chewing, no nothing on school property. We want to set a good example for kids that we respect school property, and that we're not going to allow tobacco products or vaping or which is all about taking nicotine into your system, which is the real problem with tobacco. It's a vehicle to put nicotine in your system. As that we want to ban that on all school property, and mm-hmm. So I've gotten it through a subcommittee. We'll see how the full committee deals with it.
Great, great. So how do you stay in contact with your constituents while you're down here in Richmond?
Well, we certainly use some social media. I'm not a big, huge social media person. I just, at my age, I'll be 70 coming up here in April. I just can't see myself taking selfies everywhere I go and sending it out on the internet. It's just, it's just. So my aide tells me that I'm on social media and what have you, but I'll tell him to put some things out from time to time. But I just don't want to be a constant Twitter user or Facebook user. And I do send out emails to my 6,000, 7,000 person list. Mm-hmm. Of significant events, and send them newspaper articles or things I've written, editorials I've written for local papers, or things that have happened down here. And then I just got back, I sent out a survey on what are the issues important to you this year, and I've gotten those surveys back, and we'll be tabulating the scores and getting back to information to people there.
I know a number of members do town hall meetings. Do you participate in those?
I do. I just did one last weekend with Delegate Kate Corey up in the Falls Church area, which is the eastern part of my district. But it's really hard to be well known or to communicate with folks in Northern Virginia. There's so many senators and delegates, and of course the media market there is D.C. and Maryland as well. And I remember Delegate Ward Armstrong's wife asking me one time, says, "Well, what do you do when you get on TV in Virginia? What do they usually want to talk about when you're on the local TV stations?" And I said, "Pam, for me to get on local TV in Northern Virginia, I would have to set myself on fire." It's just one of those things where we're not on the radio or on television very often. Right. And there is no Northern Virginia newspaper that anybody particularly reads, just some driveway kinds of things. So you try to do the best you can, but it's actually easier to be known and get on the air if you live in Martinsville or Danville than if you live in Fairfax County.
Right. That's where social media can help you out.
That's where social media helps you out a little bit, that's for sure. Right. That and every year getting out and knocking on some doors and campaigns and going to see your constituents. Right. That's always the best way.
Now you have we've got a couple of minutes left, but you've got a couple new delegates within your footprint of your Senate district.
I do.
Why don't you talk a little bit about them? Just
they're
briefly.
Some really good folks. Kathy Tran, who replaced the retiring Dave Albo, who was a great friend of mine and a great delegate. On the Republican side, but Kathy's got a background working for the Department of Labor. She'll bring some, real knowledge about workforce to the General Assembly down here, and of course to my district. And Carrie Delaney, who is on the, I believe, on the Commission on Youth with me, and she is going to be fabulous. She's been involved in community affairs, and she ran just a tremendously strong campaign, really connected with citizens in the western part of the county, which for a Democrat is a little harder. And she just did a great job, and she's smart and capable, and so those are two of the new folks in my part of the world.
Great. Why don't you explain to viewers who your legislative aide is and maybe how they can contact you while you're down here in session?
Well, actually what I do, if you want to contact me, let me give you my cell phone. 703-964-6821 is my cell phone, and I have an office phone that he answers every once in a while, but I encourage people to just call me on my cell. It's really not that burdensome. I'm able to get things directly, talk to people directly. I don't use email as much as others do. When people send me an email, I look up their telephone number and I call them because I'd rather have one discussion rather than 15 exchanges of emails where you're querying back and forth. It's just a direct way of talking to people, and I think they appreciate it.
Great. And who's your aide?
My aide is Matt Rogers, who worked for the Democratic Senate caucus last year in communications. He does a fabulous job. He's just on board. My previous aide, Brent McKenzie, went to work at Transurban, the folks who run the I-95 and 495 dynamic tolling express lanes. They're the private provider of that. So I've been well served, and so but people give me a call.
Great. Well, Senator, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate the time you've taken.
Well, thank you. It's always good to see you, Ray, and the cable industry in Virginia has made entertainment and news and information something that's available to us in ways that it never was before, and we appreciate it.
Great. And thank you for watching this edition of Cable Reports. I'm Ray Lemura.